Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am. I'm a long-time lurker but a first-time poster, just looking for some advice or maybe just a place to vent. I guess I should start from the beginning. It's a long one, so bear with me. I, 38M, have been married to my wife, Sarah, 35F, for 10 years. We have 2 kids, ages 7 and 4, and we live in a nice suburban neighborhood. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and block parties and BBQs are a regular thing. It seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Or so I thought. Sarah and I have always had a good relationship, or so I believed. We met in college, dated for a few years, and then got married. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to work through our issues. Sarah is beautiful, smart, and a great mom. I've always trusted her completely, maybe too completely. A few months ago, we got new neighbors. John, 40M, and his wife Lisa, 37F, moved in next door. They seemed like a nice couple at first. John is a friendly guy, always chatting with me about sports and beer. Lisa is sweet and outgoing, always ready to help out with community events. Our kids even started playing together. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. I started noticing small things at first. Sarah would laugh a little too hard at John's jokes, or she'd find reasons to go over to their house without me. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, we're all friends, right? But then I noticed that John was around our house more often, especially when I wasn't home. I chalked it up to coincidence, but it kept nagging at me. One day I came home early from work. I'd had a pretty rough day and decided to surprise Sarah with her favorite takeout. I walked in, and the house was unusually quiet. The kids were at school, but Sarah wasn't anywhere to be found. I heard voices coming from the backyard. I walked over to the window and looked out. There they were, Sarah and John, sitting way too close on our patio. They were laughing and talking in hushed tones. Something about it just felt off. I tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe they were just good friends, but my gut told me otherwise. Over the next few weeks, I started paying more attention. I noticed that Sarah's phone was always glued to her hand, and she'd get this secretive look whenever she got a text. She started dressing up more, even when she was just going to run errands. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. One evening, I decided to check her phone. I know it's a breach of privacy, but I had to know. She was in the shower, so I took my chance. Her phone was on the nightstand, and thankfully, she hadn't changed her passcode. I scrolled through her messages and found a thread with John. My heart sank. The messages were flirty, filled with inside jokes and even some suggestive comments. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I confronted Sarah that night. I showed her the messages and asked her what was going on. She looked shocked and then defensive. She said it was just harmless flirting, that she and John were just friends. She insisted that nothing physical had happened. I wanted to believe her, but my trust was shattered. I told her I needed some time to think and went to stay at a hotel for a few nights. During those nights away, I thought about everything: our marriage, our kids, our future. I couldn't just throw it all away without knowing the full truth. I decided to talk to John. Maybe he could shed some light on the situation. I caught John outside one evening. He was working on his car, and I approached him casually. We chatted for a bit about mundane stuff before I brought up the messages. His reaction was surprising. He didn't get defensive or angry. Instead, he looked almost relieved. He admitted that they had been flirting and that things had gotten out of hand, but he swore nothing physical had happened. He apologized and promised to back off. I wanted to believe him, but something still didn't sit right with me. I decided to take things a step further. I installed a small camera in our living room. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to know what was really going on when I wasn't around. A few days later, I reviewed the footage. At first, it was just normal stuff. Sarah doing housework, playing with the kids, watching TV. But then, one afternoon when the kids were at school, John came over. They sat on the couch, talking and laughing. Then, to my horror, they started kissing. It wasn't just a peck on the cheek. It was a full-on makeout session. I felt my blood boil. I confronted Sarah again, this time with the video evidence. She broke down in tears and confessed. She admitted that she had developed feelings for John and that they had kissed a few times, but she swore it hadn't gone any further. She begged for my forgiveness and promised to cut all contact with him. I didn't know what to do. I felt betrayed, angry, hurt. Part of me wanted to kick John's ass and throw Sarah out of the house. But another part of me still loved her and wanted to make things work for the sake of our kids. We decided to try marriage counseling. It's been a few weeks now, and things are slowly getting better. Sarah has been more attentive and loving, and she's cut all contact with John. I still see him around the neighborhood, and it's hard not to feel a surge of anger every time I do. But here's the thing. I'm still not sure if I can fully trust her again. Every time she goes out, I wonder if she's meeting him. Every time she gets a text, I worry it's from him. I don't want to live like this, but I don't want to throw away 10 years of marriage either. What should I do, Reddit? How do I rebuild trust after such a betrayal? Should I give it more time or cut my losses and move on? Any advice would be appreciated. I didn't expect this to blow up like it did. First off, thank you all for your kind words, support, and advice. It's overwhelming, but in a good way. I read through most of the comments, and a lot of you suggested various ways to handle this, from trying to work it out to straight up leaving. I guess I owe you all a bit more detail about what's been happening since my last post. Sarah and I had another long talk after I posted here. She's been genuinely remorseful, and I can see the guilt eating away at her. She's even suggested we move to another neighborhood to get away from John and start fresh. That's something I'm seriously considering because seeing him every day is a constant reminder of the betrayal. I also had a chat with Lisa, John's wife. She was devastated when I told her what had been happening. She had no idea, and her reaction confirmed it. She thanked me for being honest and said she would handle things on her end. I haven't seen much of John since then, which is a relief, but it also makes me wonder how things are going on their side of the fence. Our marriage counselor has been helpful, but it's a slow process. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight. It takes time and effort from both sides. Sarah has been going out of her way to prove she's committed to fixing our marriage. She's deleted John's number, blocked him on social media, and even changed gyms. But despite all this, I still find myself checking up on her. I hate feeling like a paranoid spouse, but I can't help it. It's like this dark cloud hanging over me, constantly reminding me of what happened. I want to believe her. I really do, but it's hard. One thing that's been helping is spending more time together as a family. We've been doing more activities with the kids, going on little trips, and just trying to enjoy each other's company. It's been nice, and for those moments, I almost forget about everything. Almost. A lot of you suggested individual therapy for both of us, and I think that's a good idea. I need to work through my feelings of betrayal and anger, and Sarah needs to understand why she let things go so far with John. We're looking into finding therapists who can help us with that. Some of you also asked about my relationship with John now. Honestly, I have no desire to speak to him ever again. I feel betrayed by someone I considered a friend. It's a strange feeling, like a double betrayal. I don't want to cause any scenes in the neighborhood, but I also don't want anything to do with him. I'm hoping he gets the message and stays away. For those wondering about the kids, we've been trying to keep things as normal as possible for them. They're too young to understand what's going on, and we want to shield them from all this drama. It's not their fault, and they shouldn't have to suffer because of our mistakes. I'm still not sure what the future holds for us. I want to believe we can get through this, but it's going to take a lot of work. I know some of you think I should just walk away, and maybe you're right. But for now, I'm choosing to fight for my marriage. I owe it to myself and my kids to at least try. If any of you have been through something similar and have advice on how to rebuild trust, I'd love to hear it. This has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with, and knowing there are people out there who understand and have come out the other side gives me a bit of hope. Thanks for reading and for all the support. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Wish me luck. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. Hey everyone, I'm back with an update. I never expected my last post to get so much attention, and I appreciate all the advice and support you guys have given me. It's been a roller coaster to say the least. If you haven't read my previous post, I suggest you do so for some context. Here's part 2 of my story, and it's a long one, so buckle up. After my confrontation with Sarah and our subsequent agreement to try counseling, things were tense but relatively calm. We were both trying, really trying, to make it work for the sake of our marriage and our kids. We scheduled weekly sessions with a marriage counselor and started individual therapy as well. Sarah was doing everything she could to show she was committed to fixing our relationship. She even suggested we find a new house in a different neighborhood, far away from John and the memories tied to him. I thought about it, and honestly, it seemed like a good idea. A fresh start might be what we needed. So, we began looking at houses. But as anyone who's moved can tell you, it's a slow process. Meanwhile, John was keeping his distance. I'd see him occasionally, but he avoided me like the plague. Lisa, his wife, was another story. She filed for divorce almost immediately after I told her about the affair, and I'd heard through the grapevine that she was planning to move out with their kids. One afternoon, while I was out mowing the lawn, Lisa came over. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. She asked if we could talk, so we sat down on the porch. She thanked me again for telling her the truth and apologized for any part she might have played in not noticing the signs earlier. I reassured her that it wasn't her fault. We were both victims in this mess. Lisa then dropped a bombshell. She had hired a private investigator after our conversation, and it turned out John had been cheating on her long before they moved to our neighborhood. Apparently, he had a string of affairs, and Sarah was just the latest in a long line of women. Hearing that was like another punch in the gut. Not only had my wife betrayed me, but she was just one of many. It made me question everything about our marriage and our life together. I didn't tell Sarah about Lisa's revelation right away. I needed time to process it myself. Our counseling sessions continued, and Sarah was opening up more about why she felt drawn to John. She said she felt neglected and unappreciated at home, and John gave her the attention she craved. It was painful to hear, but at least she was being honest. We had good days and bad days. On the good days, we felt like we were making progress, like we could actually overcome this. We'd go on dates, spend quality time with the kids, and just try to enjoy each other's company. On the bad days, the distrust and anger would bubble up, leading to arguments and tears. It was a constant back and forth, a tug of war between wanting to move forward and being held back by the past. One particularly rough night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Lisa had said, about John's history of affairs. I got up and went to the living room where I had left my laptop. I decided to dig deeper into John's past. Maybe it was masochistic, but I needed to know more. I spent hours online, searching for any information I could find about him. I found a few vague references to his infidelities, mostly in old social media posts and comments. Nothing concrete, but enough to confirm that Lisa's PI had done a thorough job. The next day, I confronted Sarah with what I'd found. She looked genuinely surprised and horrified. She insisted she had no idea about John's past and that she had truly believed he cared about her. I wanted to believe her, but the doubts were still there. How could she have been so blind? How could I have been so blind? Our counselor suggested we take a break from each other to give ourselves some space to think and heal. Sarah stayed with her sister for a week, while I stayed home with the kids. It was a strange, lonely week. I missed Sarah, but I also enjoyed the peace and quiet, the time to reflect without the constant tension between us. During that week, Lisa and I became closer. Not in a romantic way, but as friends who were going through similar experiences. We'd talk about our feelings, our frustrations, and our hopes for the future. It was comforting to have someone who understood exactly what I was going through. She was planning to move back to her hometown with the kids once the divorce was finalized, and I felt a pang of sadness knowing she'd be leaving soon. When Sarah came back, we had a long talk. She apologized again, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. She told me she wanted to rebuild our marriage, that she was willing to do whatever it took. I believed her, but I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but I was willing to try. We continued with counseling, both together and individually. It was tough, but slowly, we started to see some progress. Sarah was more open and communicative, and I was working on my own issues, like my tendency to bottle up my feelings. We were learning to be a team again, to support each other instead of tearing each other down. One day, Sarah came home from her individual therapy session looking unusually thoughtful. She sat me down and said she had something important to tell me. She confessed that during one of her sessions, she realized she had never fully dealt with some trauma from her past. Before we met, she had been in a toxic relationship, one where she was constantly belittled and made to feel worthless. She admitted that she had never fully healed from that, and those unresolved feelings had contributed to her seeking validation from someone like John. It was a lot to take in. I felt a mix of emotions, sympathy, anger, sadness. But mostly, I felt hope. It seemed like a breakthrough, a chance to understand her actions on a deeper level. It didn't excuse what she did, but it gave me a clearer picture of why it happened. We started working through those issues together, and things began to improve. We were more patient with each other, more understanding. The move to a new neighborhood was still on the table, but we decided to wait until we were both in a better place emotionally. We didn't want to run away from our problems, we wanted to face them head on. Meanwhile, Lisa's divorce was finalized, and she moved away with her kids. We had a small farewell gathering for her, just a few close friends. It was bittersweet. I was happy for her, that she was moving on and starting fresh, but I also felt the loss of a friend who had been a pillar of support during one of the toughest times in my life. As the months went by, Sarah and I continued to work on our marriage. It wasn't perfect, and there were still days when the past would rear its ugly head, but we were committed to moving forward. We started going on more dates, finding new activities to do together, and just enjoying each other's company. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, like we were falling in love all over again. One evening, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The kids were playing in the yard, and it was one of those rare, peaceful moments. Sarah turned to me and said, "I know I've said it before, but I really am sorry. I never meant to hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could get through this. Maybe we could come out stronger on the other side. I took her hand and squeezed it, a silent promise that I was willing to keep trying. Life moved on, and so did we. We started making plans for the future again, talking about trips we wanted to take, goals we wanted to achieve. The scars were still there, but they were healing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might actually make it. But then, one day, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a message that would throw everything back into chaos and make me question whether we could truly move on from the past. I'll keep you all updated. Thanks again for all the support and advice. It means more than you know. Hey everyone, I'm back with another update. This is probably the hardest post I've ever had to write, but I think it's important to share what's been happening. If you haven't read my previous posts, I suggest you do for some context. Here's part 3 of my story. It's a long one, so get comfortable. After that last message from John, I felt like I was being pulled back into a nightmare. I had just started to feel like things were improving, like Sarah and I were finally making progress. But his message cast a shadow over everything. "I know I said I was leaving, but there's something else you need to know. It's about Sarah." Those words haunted me. I didn't want to believe anything he said, but the doubt gnawed at me. What if there was some truth to his claims? What if Sarah still had feelings for him? I decided to confront her again, but I wanted to approach it carefully. When Sarah returned from helping her sister, she was exhausted. I gave her a day to settle back in, not wanting to overwhelm her right away. But the message kept nagging at me, and I couldn't wait any longer. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat her down. "Sarah, we need to talk." She looked at me, worried. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "I got another message from John." Her face paled. What did he say this time? I told her everything, about how John claimed she still had feelings for him, about how he said they had a real connection. I watched her reaction closely, looking for any sign of deceit. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head vehemently. "That's not true. I don't have feelings for him. I've told you everything, and I've been honest with you. He's just trying to cause trouble." "I want to believe you," I said quietly, "but it's hard." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know it's hard, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We can get through this, but we have to trust each other." I looked into her eyes, searching for the truth. I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal had left scars that were hard to heal. "I'm trying," I said. "I really am." In the days that followed, we worked harder than ever on our marriage. We continued with counseling, both individually and together. We talked openly about our fears, our doubts, and our hopes for the future. Slowly, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. One day, our counselor suggested we write letters to each other, expressing our feelings and hopes for the future. It was a cathartic exercise, and it helped us open up in ways we hadn't been able to before. Sarah's letter brought me to tears. She wrote about her regrets, her love for me, and her commitment to making our marriage work. She acknowledged the pain she had caused and promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to me. My letter to her was equally emotional. I wrote about my hurt, my anger, but also my hope for the future. I told her that I wanted to forgive her, to move forward together, but that it would take time and effort from both of us. Sharing those letters was a turning point for us. It brought us closer, made us more determined to fight for our marriage. We started making more plans for the future, talking about our dreams and goals. It felt like we were finally on the right path. But then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I received a call from Lisa, John's ex-wife. She sounded anxious and asked if we could meet. I agreed, curious about what she had to say. We met at the same coffee shop where I had confronted John. Lisa looked tired but resolute. She wasted no time getting to the point. "John's been harassing Sarah," she said bluntly. I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "He's been sending her messages, trying to get her to leave you and be with him," she explained. "Sarah didn't want to tell you because she didn't want to cause more trouble. But I thought you should know." I felt a surge of anger. John was still trying to interfere in our lives, even after everything that had happened. "Do you have any proof?" I asked. Lisa nodded and pulled out her phone. She showed me a series of text messages between John and Sarah. Sarah's responses were clear. She wanted nothing to do with him and repeatedly told him to leave her alone. Seeing those messages was both a relief and a trigger for my anger. Sarah had been honest with me. She didn't have feelings for John. She was trying to protect our marriage. But John's persistence was infuriating. When I got home, I showed Sarah the messages. She looked relieved but also scared. "I didn't want to worry you," she said softly. "I thought if I ignored him, he'd eventually stop." I hugged her tightly. "I'm glad you told me. We'll handle this together." We decided to take legal action against John for harassment. It was a stressful process, but it was necessary to protect our family. The restraining order was granted, and John was warned to stay away from us. With John out of the picture, we finally felt like we could breathe again. Sarah and I continued to work on our marriage, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. We started to feel like a team again, supporting each other through the ups and downs. One sunny afternoon, while watching our kids play in the yard, Sarah turned to me and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" I nodded, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. "Yeah, we have." Life went on, and we continued to grow stronger together. The scars of the past were still there, but they were fading, replaced by new memories and a renewed sense of love and commitment. We eventually found a new house, in a new neighborhood, far away from the painful memories of the past. Moving was a fresh start, a chance to build new memories in a place that felt like our own. As we settled into our new home, things started to feel normal again. We made new friends, found new routines, and slowly but surely, the past began to fade into the background. Our kids adapted well to the change, and seeing them happy and thriving made it all worthwhile. But just as things were starting to feel right, life threw us another curveball. One evening, Sarah received a call from her sister. Their mother's health had taken a turn for the worse, and she needed Sarah to come back and help. It was a tough decision, but we agreed that she should go. Family comes first, and this was an important situation. She packed her bags and left the next day, leaving me alone with the kids once again. This time, though, it felt different. We were stronger, more united. We stayed in touch every day, texting and calling each other. It wasn't the same as having her here, but it helped. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification for a message from an unknown number. My heart sank as I opened it. It was from John again. "I know I said I was leaving, but there's something else you need to know. It's about Sarah." I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. What now? I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "What is it?" He responded almost immediately. "I didn't want to tell you this before, but I think you deserve to know the whole truth. Sarah wasn't just a fling for me. We had a real connection. She told me things about your marriage, about how she felt neglected and unappreciated. I think she still has feelings for me." I felt a mix of anger and fear. Was he just trying to stir up trouble, or was there some truth to what he was saying? I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt started to creep in. I decided to confront Sarah about it when she got back. I couldn't let this fester, couldn't let it undermine the progress we had made. But for now, I had to focus on taking care of the kids and getting through each day. When Sarah finally returned home, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Taking care of her mom had taken a toll on her. We hugged, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But the nagging doubts were still there, lurking in the back of my mind. That night, after the kids were asleep, I brought it up. "I got another message from John," I said, watching her reaction closely. She looked startled, then angry. "What did he say?" I told her about the message, about his claim that she still had feelings for him. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently. "That's not true. I don't have feelings for him. I've told you everything, and I've been honest with you. He's just trying to cause trouble." I wanted to believe her, but the doubts wouldn't go away. "Why would he say that then? What does he have to gain?" "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "Maybe he's just a manipulative asshole who wants to mess with our heads. But I swear to you, I don't have any feelings for him. I love you, and only you." I looked into her eyes, searching for the truth. I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal had left scars that will remain with me for the rest of my life. Thanks for reading.